I studied and I did badly in the exam or I performed badly in the thing, doesn't mean, having spent 6 hours doesn't mean that you really understand the thing.
Yeah, you prepare them, you put them in this frame.
At this 300 level, they've passed through a number of courses, so they're like, they're already in that frame of mind. But I don't have the challenge, or colleagues have the challenge with 100 level, so entry level students that do not see it, they don't get it. Very importantly now, the assessment criteria that you are going to follow, and this is the third point that I want to mention. The assessment criteria that you're going to follow have to be well formulated and shared with the students from the beginning of the course. So that it's not a surprise for them that you're going to assess them on what. They need to know, I'm going to assess you on whatever you want. Personally, what I've done and what I do is that I assess them on progress, and I explain what progress is. So I'm going to assess you on for progress, why?
In language, by the way. Very important.
So, because if you say I assess you on improvement, I mean, my definition of improvement might be, so as long as the criteria are well formulated, objective, or sometimes I like to use this very fancy word, objectively verifiable. So anybody can actually objectively verify what people have met the criteria or not. So there isn't this argument of you've done it, no, I haven't done it, or whatever. And these are, of course, the longer the criteria, the more elaborate it's going to be for you to work. So basically, what I would suggest is that, first of all, for developing proper sets of criteria, you have to have a set of learning outcomes. What do I want the students to learn in this course? When a student finishes the course, he or she should be able to, and we have bullet points with verbs, action verbs. And these learning outcomes need to be shared. Personally, we now require them that they are in all our outlines for the courses. So they have to be shared with the students. We don't want to have 20 learning outcomes because it's going to be mind-dazzling for the students and the faculty. We want to have 3 or 4 learning outcomes, clear and precise. Then once these are there, the assessment criteria for the portfolio has to be in line with these learning outcomes. What am I doing to assess in your work to actually show it to yourself and to myself that you have actually met some or all of these learning outcomes? And again, if there are 5, 6 criteria, it's more than enough. Share them with the students. When they are actually doing the exercise, they actually have in front of them what they are going to be assessed on. This actually makes things much easier and prevents a lot of argumentation about the grade, about the performance, so I always, I joke with the students and we channel this argumentation into reflecting purposes or activities in your actual portfolio. So rather than focus on why did you not do well, why did you not grade, focus and say what skills am I having difficulties with, what skills am I actually having problems with, what skills did I actually, what shortcomings did I overcome? So, from when I started this, I realized it does take a bit of a struggle to start with. The students are not really aware what we're talking about. It's something that is usually completely new, and they're not very happy about it. They're not happy about it. It's big to them and they're not resisting. And then once they do it once, they realize, oh my God, actually, I'm happier with what I'm doing usually. And it's clear to me what I can do and what I cannot do. And it's clear to me as they go into reflecting on their own learning process, it's clear to me how can I actually improve. I mean, I don't want to use the political words, but actually the students do feel empowered. They all of a sudden they realize we actually have a control on our learning process. We're not sitting there and somebody telling us what to do. We're actually empowered. We can actually take steps to learn or address some of the problems ourselves. And it gives them a very positive feeling about their learning process. And again, I always, to me, I think the most important thing is that there needs to be a shift in the students' minds and in the instructors' minds away from assessing outputs to assessing processes. Of course, at the end of the day, the student has to sort of be able to do a certain level, a certain skill to pass. But throughout, for them to reach that, if you actually focus on assessing the process to get there rather than the steps they achieve, the learning experience is complete. it did improve my course environment tremendously. And for me, it actually helped me when I look at the portfolio every cycle. I realized who is progressing well and who's having history, or how well are different people progressing. So it's a very clear indication that exams cannot do, that assignments can address, or maybe research papers, or can address but not thoroughly. Typically in an exam, you actually look at output. Do they know that or they don't know that, or do they have the skill or they don't have the skill? It doesn't really help you see how they're progressing. So I found it very, very clear, and then if people are kind of different in progress, I can really target or suggest for individuals. It becomes the sort of my feedback becomes very individualized on how different people are progressing through the course. And then, which actually ties to the second point, is that their reflective part, the part that they're going to sit there and write. I mean, I had, of course, chemistry students. I'm not in chemistry because they want or they like to write. Typically, chemistry students do not want to write. They just want to write a sentence or an equation or a calculation instead of, they hate writing text. And it takes a bit of sort of, I don't know whether the language classes are different or they have to write a bit, so they'll be probably more receptive of the idea of writing. But definitely, in chemistry, the idea is, if they are resistant to writing, they write a couple of sentences. It doesn't have to be a paragraph, just a couple of sentences. And of course, once they start doing it, they realize actually it's quite liberating. They get it out, and then typically I see, it starts with a couple of sentences. By the last cycle, there are chunks of text about what they learned, what they haven't learned, and why. For the students, I think the most important thing is that it helps them recognize that they actually are learning something. And part of the learning process is the identity or the self-awareness of the fact that I'm learning. Part of it is that I become aware that I'm learning something new, that I'm improving. So it encourages me and gets me to work more on whatever I'm doing. So, and this is some of, when we sort of have surveys at the end of the class and we get feedback from them, anonymous feedback about what, this is one of the things they actually identify. They're quite happy to realize, after all, I'm learning something out of this. A lot of sort of disciplined courses in different areas that they see, but anyway, people say, why am I taking this course? What am I going to be using this for? Different than the language, it's obvious for them what they're using for, it's obvious the practicality of it. But in some of the disciplines, some of the fundamental courses are, am I ever going to use this? And a portfolio actually helps them realize that you're learning, and if there are activities related to applications, then why are we learning it? Of course, it helps them identify specific strengths and challenges, their own strengths. This reflective practice actually focuses their minds on what problems they actually have, or what strengths. I don't tell them only write about negative things, write about positive things. If you can do something easily and you're happy about it, write it. Because then this is an area of strength that if colleagues have difficulty, you'll be able to actually help them with. And very importantly, allow them to revisit the work. So by just looking at the portfolio every time I look at it from the beginning of the semester, then they know that if there's something that I couldn't do the first couple of weeks, 6 weeks into the course or 8 weeks into the course, I can really revisit it and see whether I can do it again. Because I've evolved in my learning experience. And if they manage to realize they actually are capable of solving all the problems, then it gives them a very strong boost about their learning process. And of course, if they realize they still cannot do it, then there is a serious problem, and it's very important for them to flag it up at that point. And maybe this is where we stop here. I'll just go through the slide and then we stop, and then I'll kindly ask you, either individually or collectively, you can all go together to work on these points. So basically, if one wants to develop a course structure, what are the steps? First of all, why are we doing it? There is a need to have clear in your mind as an instructor why you're doing that. Why are you actually bothering with that? So there must be a very clear learning outcome, and identify how the portfolio is going to help you achieve the learning outcome. So this needs to be very clear. So why are we doing this? Then there is, following that, you need to actually develop the items that you will need the students to have in the course portfolio. What is it that needs to be included for you to use in assessment? Then you need to decide to yourself how the portfolio is going to be assessed. Yeah, fine. So these are the learning outcomes. The portfolio is going to help you achieve these. Then, to do that, the portfolio needs to contain 1, 2, 3. Then, how am I going to assess the portfolio? And this is twofold. The process of assessing, are you going to do it yourself? Are you actually, if you have a class of 30, you actually are going to ask students to assess their colleagues' portfolios. As I said, sort of a peer learning or peer instruction activity.
Yeah.
Are you going to do it for grades? Some people actually, I'm putting this as a question because some people say, I don't want to do it for grades. Typically, knowing that students do things only for grades, or mostly for grades, a carrot there will actually get them to take it seriously. The assessment criteria have to be very clear. And the shorter they are, the more concise they are, the simpler it's going to be for you and the students. And very important to share these with students. And some people have even suggested, actually ask the students to develop the criteria with you, maybe amongst themselves. First week as an activity, you explain what the portfolio is going to be about, the learning outcomes, etc. And then say we want to actually, what should be in the portfolio? Why don't you come up with a set of criteria, find what says collectively, individually, or have them individually, and then have a class session or upper class session where people discuss them collectively to actually come to agree on the criteria. Of course, you have to play an active role because sometimes the students come up with things that are ridiculous. Saying, if we have a folder, then you get some grades. And then, at the end, I always find it important or useful to get students' feedback. This can be done, there are the evaluations, the normal AC evaluations. But for some reason, students tend not to really take them too seriously or really evaluate. So I'll actually ask CLT to come into my classes or either come or actually prepare surveys that I will release online on Blackboard or a questionnaire. A survey where they you actually often, doesn't have to be very extensive, but often specifically about the course in general, I tend, whenever I'm using a tool like this, I tend to try to ask specific questions about the portfolio or whatever other tool or whatever other innovative approach you have in the class to really get feedback whether you finding it useful or not. So what I suggest, I don't know whether you agree or not, if we maybe stop here for some time and have people maybe, obtain student feedback, we will not do a survey now, but maybe work on the first 3 points. What are typical learning outcomes that you'd like to develop for your courses, 3 or 4? If you're going to be using a portfolio, what will it actually include? The minimum things that you will include. And what criteria you will actually use to assess it. I know that it's, in 15 minutes or 20 minutes or even an hour, we will not reach an outcome that is going to be necessarily implemented right away, but it's just a way of getting people engaged in thinking about it. So should we do that?
Yes.
Okay. And then I'll just be walking up and down. Please feel free to either do it individually or do it collectively. As a group together.